The three things that most people around the world have said that they missed during the pandemic, their family and loved ones, live music, and the cinema. And this is a way of dignifying and giving people that experience. That's what they've been longing for.
I love this film on several levels. The experience of wandering through this city that's both sort of cosmopolitan and sort of ancient and mysterious at the same time felt very resonant. And since both of you aren't originally from there, I thought maybe you could tell me just a bit about what it was like for you to go there for the first time, and what struck both of you as sort of so distinctive about this backdrop.
Well, you got there before I did.
Yeah, I was there in 2017 for FIXI in Cartagena, and then I had a chance to travel around. And the moment I landed, in Bogota, this massive mountain and the heavy clouds, it's really got me. And it looks similar to Chiang Mai, my hometown, but 10 times bigger. And I felt that that there's some communication going on between the inhabitants and the nature, because you have to prepare. When you leave the house, you bring umbrella, you bring jacket, you bring everything, because the weather is shifting all the time. So I feel this dialogue really curious, and then I started to learn about the history and stories from people, and some events that occurred to me that all this integrated into the film. Yeah.
And the graffiti, for me, I have to say, it feels like the city is really communicative. It's a pictorial landscape in more ways than one, and it's wanting dialogue all the time. And everybody who we know now and who we work with there has stories about recent past, about not so recent past, but it's sort of history lives so viscerally there. And that was sort of what we were looking for, because we were looking for a place where both of us were strangers, but had this sort of relationship with trauma, that had a kind of reverberation of trauma that we both recognize as someone from Thailand and someone from Scotland. But there it was in Colombia, and sort of loud and clear to be picked up.
Now, you hit on something else that I think is valuable, which is that the two of you seem like very natural fits together in a way that it almost, I would have thought that you've been working together for years. And I know that that's been a discussion. But Tilda, can you talk a bit about when you first encountered Apichatpong's films? I understand Tropical Malady had an impact on you.
Yes, I first met Joe through Tropical Malady in 2004 in Cannes. I had the honor to be on the jury, and it was screening in competition. And so I was lucky enough to see it on that screen with that sound system, which is always a good thing. And for me, it was just a recognition. I felt he was, as I know he is, a brother, absolutely a brother in arms, and his frame and the way in which he gives us respect and space to really live in the pulse of the film was so just after my own heart, but also kind of familiar in a way from my roots in cinema, which were with Derek Jarman. I feel a kind of kinship, a sort of secret association, and so we are we are brothers.
And Joe, I guess I can call you that in this context. If there was a connection naturally for you with Tilda, what was it on your side?
Well, I knew her from, when in my early days of discovering cinema, and not just any cinema, but experimental cinema in Chicago days, when I have a chance to see 16mm prints of German's films. And one that struck me is The Last of England, that fierceness, that fire, literally fire, and the fire in her is really, for me, that's memorable, cannot forget. Yeah.
The other thing I think is quite striking about this film is that it really shows how much you can sort of maintain control over the experience that your audience has. And I remember seeing this past July, Bong Joon-ho did a masterclass at Cannes where he was talking, I think Tilda, you were there as well, where he was talking about a filmmaker, you know, is basically the final arbiter of how the audience experiences time. And you can't do that in any other context, only in cinema. And I wonder, Joe, for you, how you think about time with relation to a film like this, because every moment seems to be very precisely thought out. So how do you sort of approach that specific kind of temporal challenge?
I think like Bong Joon-ho is a privilege, and it's a magic, you know, that I still don't know the formula. Mm-hmm. It's still something that keep me going back to cinema. You know, it's about this sculpting the idea of building a person that exists, you know, only with lights and in temporal moment. And I don't know, and the funny thing or curious thing about this film is it feels differently in different time we show it, you know, in different city, different group of audience. And one of the theories or ideas maybe is because it's really an open film that with different audience, different crowd, you know, activate something differently.
Tilda, what about you? You must have seen this film several times.
I've seen it several times, and it continues to be different. I have a feeling that it always will be. I think it's something to do, it feels as if it's porous. And I think it has something to do with the fact that it's truly experiential. It's not really about information. And that's the task we set ourselves, really, not to deal with a kind of primary narrative pulse, but for the pulse to be about being, and not just for the portrait of the protagonist, Jessica, who is a kind of avatar, but for the audience, so that she can be a portal for the audience to also just be, not to be constantly sort of checking that they're following the plot, or, you know, anticipating some twist, or feeling themselves edit their interest in the frame, but that they can actually take in the environment of each frame at a time and live there, and not just go, oh, well, I'm not going to look at that bird in the corner because it's not that interesting. What I'm really interested in is the killer and how that's going to turn out. That feeling of encouraging the audience to just live in the frame and to suspend this sort of editing process, so that the audience is invited to just be. And so there's a real dialogue between the film and the audience, because every audience is different. So seeing it in New York, well, actually, we've seen it with two audiences in New York, very different evenings. And we saw it in Bogota. We took it back to the village where we shot in Colombia, which was incredibly moving. We were showing it in the rain, and people stood for the duration of the film in the square, looking at a blow-up cinema. And that was beautiful. A completely different film. And of course, in Cannes, a very different film again.
I do want to ask more about that. But first, I'm curious about what kind of a performative challenge this represents for you. I mean, there are multiple moments where it seems that you have to hold a pose or look in a certain direction and sort of remain focused, but also your physicality is very precise. So what was that process like for you in terms of, you know, staying in that scene?
Well, for me, it represents a sort of divine opportunity to really sink into something that comes very naturally to me, that I'm not often given the opportunity to do, which is to be really slow, which I naturally am, and to be really still, which I naturally am. I'm a lazy beast, and I like to be slow when I'm not in a social situation where I get drawn into the energy of other people, because I'm also porous. That feeling of Jessica as a portrait of someone who is really dislocated, not disconnected, because in fact, by being dislocated, she is super connected, which makes her still, because she's not actually driving anything. She's not offering anything. She's not chattering away. She's not making any kind of social pose. she's sort of borderless, and that was grace for me, because it meant also within the frame, not just the physical frame of the shot, but also the frame of the time of the take, because very often we were talking about the frame of 15 minutes. It gave me and my fellow objects in the frame the license to just drive the pulse, drive the harmony of the shot. And that's really an enormous luxury.
Joe, what about you, just in terms of figuring out the rhythms for this film? I mean, it's not even just about what we see, it's about what we hear. And you know, I can imagine a version of this film almost as a radio play in a way. And I'm curious about sort of how you mapped it out in your own mind, what the sort of textural experience of the film was going to be like.
Well, I think the foundation is, about being strangers in that environment and to embrace that not knowing quality. And so I shot the film chronologically as much as possible. And that is, the process of working with Tilda and the rest of the crew, to get to that rhythm. I honestly said, I don't know what I wanted in the beginning, and even to the end I'm still like, I thought I knew, but I like other film also, I left a lot of rooms to discover in the editing too, but this is a key, just to slowly get into the rhythm of each location, and in that particular time of shooting, what kind of light, what kind of temperature there. So it's I don't know, maybe like meditation in a way.
Yeah, I mean that it certainly does feel like film is meditation, which is why I'm sure it must be, if not frustrating, then a bit of a challenge when people ask you to explain the film to them. But that's probably something you're used to over the course of your career. I mean, what is it like for you to have to sort of explain in the most literal sense what a film like this is about?
I always say it's about vibration. It's about dislocation. I don't know what else to. Of course, we can say it's about this woman who tried to trace the sound, and that's it, no? And that's the key.
I'm gratified at how little people are asking us to explain the film. I'm really happy about that. I feel as if somehow the film is looking after us and saying, don't worry, I got this. And it really feels like in the conversations we've been having with people in your position, Eric, that we've been, people seem to be showing up for the film on a kind of personal level, which is really incredibly heartening.
And I'm curious to what value you see in these kinds of opportunities. I mean, you seem like you're constantly working in different modes as a performer, and I'm sure that if you're on, say, a big studio production, that there isn't a lot of time for the kinds of opportunities afforded for a project like this. But what kind of value, in contrast to those other kinds of experiences, does this kind of project represent for you?
Well, the fact is, I don't often show up in big studio projects. That's very much a kind of away game scenario for me, and this is definitely my kind of home patch. This is the kind of atmosphere of my work with Joe is sort of my happy place, and it's what I tend to do. Very occasionally, I'll sort of pop up in the Wes Anderson circuit, but at the same time, it's always about a conversation which is particular to that particular group, that particular filmmaker, and feels kind of authentic and interesting and usually experimental. I mean, it's usually whoever it is doing something that filmmaker's never done before, and so that's always the thing that gets me. But no, I would say, yeah, in answer to your question, it's not size is not everything, and the idea of working in a big studio production, which I've only done a handful of times in my life, whenever I've done that, it's almost, I would say, always been with a filmmaker who said, listen, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I don't quite know how I'm going to do it. And so it's always felt like making a Pet Shop video with Derek Jarman at the end of the day. It's always felt like a new new adventure.
And Joe, for you, I remember when you were talking about how on the last film you were sort of ready to move beyond Thailand, to try something outside of Thailand. So having gone through that experience now with this completed work, what did you get out of the experience overall, or do you feel as if you'd like to continue working abroad going forward?
Yes, definitely. Film is a universal language, and I just feel that this is the process of making it matters to me sometimes, or equally like the film itself. And to be in such a cushion, with comrades, of film lovers, of this, crew members in Bogota, in Colombia, was really the best start one could wish for. With Diana Bustamante as a producer, there is a dream.
I think it's great to see that this film was a Colombian Oscar submission. I'm curious how you feel about that, given that you yourself are not Colombian.
Oh, it's enormously touching for Joe and I, and also a massive relief in a way that, having gone with this stranger spirit, especially to a territory that's quite used to strangers coming and making endless drug movies there. It's really gratifying for us, and very, very moving that Colombia has rightfully claimed this as a Colombian film and is proud of it. That's huge for us, and it's just a huge relief.
I feel obliged to ask you about the distribution strategy for this film, because obviously it's something that has in a very short period of time generated a lot of different reactions. Now, one thing that I thought was striking, Joe, is that I thought, well, if more people were aware of the gallery work you were doing that was never released in any other place except the gallery, this might be an easier thing for them to understand. But how do you feel about the sort of plan for how this film is getting out there, and the various reactions people might have to that?
Well, for me, cinema is always personal, and that I value the relationship with the audience, and I respect the audience very much. And I know that they are selective, and that's someone who follow my work, and I genuinely think that this way is actually to reach more people, but you just need to be patient, and just it doesn't mean that the theaters are empty, all during these times. It's just that they're with others magic, and then this light will travel slowly, and that actually is to it remind me of when I was young in this small town and was waiting for this event or this film from Bangkok to arrive, and there's certain beauty in that imagination and waiting, and when it arrives, it feels like that it is only for you, it's special, so when this time when cinema is I would say, people say it's fragile, and I say it's still very relevant, and that to do this is to activate or reactivate this preciousness of your cinema, your own cinema, and Neon has something waiting, to make every place special, and I think instead of blanketing and make it disappear quickly, for this kind of film, it is better to slowly go and make sure that people see it. Yeah, I
think there's this idea that reaching the audience is always possible through a frame for a screen of any size, and we're kind of reminding people that we're dignifying the cinema and acknowledging that it may be possible, however much we love and feel strong about our film, it may be possible for this film not to reach its audience if it's on a smaller screen, and it might be possible to waste the film. at the same time, I mean, this is a strategy that's after our own hearts. I mean, I run a traveling cinema for many years in the Highlands of Scotland, and the idea of taking a pilgrimage of Memoria around the country and dignifying the local cinemas in towns and maybe forests and maybe army bases and maybe hospital car parks or wherever they happen to be, to bring together local communities, to have an experience, not just to learn the plot and to share in information, but to have an experience together. It's not just a project for Memoria, it's a project for big cinema. And I hope that this initiative will really be good for all of us, all the films that we're looking forward to seeing on a big screen going forward. I mean, people have talked a lot of words in the last few years about, the death of cinema. Long before the pandemic, they've talked about, smaller screens being a threat to the bigger screens. And if there's one way in which I can bless the pandemic, it's that the three things that people, not just cine freaks like us, but the three things that most people around the world have said that they missed during the pandemic, their family and loved ones, live music, and the cinema. And this is a way of dignifying and giving people that experience. That's what they've been longing for. They've had all that information on the end of their bed, but they still want the live experience. So that's what Neon is putting their money where their mouth is and offering people. I think it's magical. For both of you, I guess, and what I'm wondering is coming out of that experience and actually having something that you can give to the world, where is your head at in terms of how this experience has changed you and how you think it might affect the way you work going forward? One of the things, the first big cinema experience that we had, both of us, I think, was in Cannes, maybe you too. And the first thing that I sort of picked up in the ether was the gratitude of the audience. There was not one jot of jadedness or tiredness or cynicism in this highly sort of cineastic audience. It was like we were all re-enchanted with the experience of sitting, I mean, admittedly in that incredible theater with that amazing sound system and that great screen, that great projection, but the gratitude and the modesty of understanding how rich we are to even have cinema. That's a huge bonus. It really is, because, it was possible a few years back for people to have forgotten that. I think we feel strangely productive. I mean, I've never worked so much in my life. We just need the cinemas to show these films on, but we're going to have them. We're going to have them, and we're going to have the audience, because the audience is going to be up for it. Well, thank you for your optimism. It's very much welcome at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thanks again.